Yes, guys, welcome back to the MMA Sucker podcast. As always, I'm your host, Fraser Crone, and I just wanted to say straight off the bat, thank you. Last week's podcast about Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury was my most listened to podcast ever. I think I got about 6,500 views on that, and I got almost 1,000 views on a a reaction video to whether the rematch between Tyson and Islam. I've already got my head on the game. Tyson and Usyk would happen. Um, I don't do this for the views. I do it for the passion of the sport. But when you get the kind of validation like that from almost 6,000, well, almost 6,500 people watching your podcast and interacting on social media with you, it really does mean a lot, and it kind of validates what I'm doing here. Obviously, I used to do the podcast with Tim. Tim's had to step away from the podcast, and now I'm riding solo, and the views haven't always been there, but I'll keep doing this. It doesn't matter if it's one person, if it's 100 people. I do this for the passion of the sport, like I said, and like I say, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. If you've come across from last week's episode to watch this week's episode because you like the content, welcome. Thank you very much. Um, we do this, I do this every Monday or Tuesday. Little preview of UFC stuff, little preview of boxing, or this week will be a review of the boxing and a preview of the UFC. I'm going to jump straight into the weekend's boxing action. We got the rematch between Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor. Now, I thought this was a phenomenal fight. I thought that the fight should have happened 2 years ago after Jack Catterall was robbed in Glasgow against Josh Taylor. But finally, we did actually get the rematch. If you remember that rematch, I'll link the podcast that we did about it on the video. Myself and Tim, we spoke a lot about, or at least I did, a lot about corruption, a lot about the corrupt nature of the fallout from that fight. Um, it was it was a corrupt result. Josh Taylor won the fight, but didn't actually win the fight well, he won the fight officially, but the fight itself, it was a robbery. It was corruption, and it should have been looked into. People should have been suspended. Ian John Lewis has come out this week and said he hadn't even heard of Jack Catterall before the fight, and he's one of the judges that gave it in favor of Josh Taylor. Kind of tells you all you need to know about boxing. But we finally got the rematch. It was delayed, it was delayed, it was delayed. And we finally got the rematch on Saturday night in Leeds in the UK. And it was a phenomenal fight. The first 6 rounds I felt were Jack Catterall's. Josh Taylor then definitely came on later on in the fight. But the story of the fight for me was the jab of Jack Catterall. He landed, I think it was in the ninth round, although I think I might be mixing that up with Tyson and Usyk. But Jack Catterall caught Josh Taylor with a massive overhand, and wobbled him, didn't drop him. Both men fell into the corner. That's good. I think that was clever from Josh Taylor. He grabbed onto Jack Catterall and was able to kind of collapse himself into the corner with Jack Catterall, get that extra little bit of recovery that he probably needed. But like I say, it was the jab of Jack Catterall that sort of won in the first 6 rounds, and then he only really, technically only needed to win one more round after that to win the entire fight. He did go on to win the fight, of course, as we know. Then we got Bob Arum. Someone come and collect your granddad. Bob Arum, he's a legend of the sport. He's almost 90 years old, but to be coming to be stealing the moment away from Jack Catterall to, you know, hold court like he did and say, the scorecards were a disgrace. I'm never going to have an American fighter fight in the UK. Come on, mate. Like, where were you 2 years ago? It wasn't a good look for me. We also we had a Cage Warriors card this week where George Hardwick picked up yet another victory. We know about George Hardwick. I'm pretty sure. I'm just going to double check, but I'm pretty confident that he was on the Contender Series and just came up short on that. I can't remember how he lost that fight, but I know that he did lose that fight on the Contender Series. Um, Sorry, not George Hardwick, Harry Hardwick. I'm getting my Hardwicks mixed up. George Hardwick did have the opportunity on the Contender Series. Harry Hardwick won the interim Cage Warriors featherweight title, extending his undefeated streak to seven, his winning streak to three. There's a draw in there, but he's undefeated in his last seven. Hasn't lost a fight since 2020. He's UFC bound. I wouldn't be too surprised, depending on, you know, could he maybe sign for UFC 304 and debut at UFC 304 in Manchester? I doubt it. I don't think that he's quite, pay-per-view ready, as it were. But regardless, he put in a really good performance, rear naked choke victory. Sorry, punches victory, rear naked choke before that. Just a really good performance by Harry Hardwick. And like I said, I think he's UFC bound. But moving on to this weekend, UFC pay-per-views are back. It seems like, the UFC pay-per-view schedule is pretty relentless. We obviously had 300 in April. 301, I think was it the end of April, beginning of May, 301 in when we got that brilliant Steve Erceg and Alejandro Pantoja fight. And now we've got Dustin Poirier versus Islam Makhachev for the UFC lightweight title. Number one pound for pound fighter on the planet, Islam Makhachev, looking to defend his lightweight title against a legitimate lightweight for the first time in since he's become champion. He's got two defenses of his belt, both of which against the former featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski, who was stepping up in weight to compete against Makhachev. Don't get me wrong, they're still two phenomenal wins. I think that last win, he's coming off the biggest win of his career, Islam Makhachev, when he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski. Becoming the first man in the UFC to knock Volkanovski out before, obviously, as we know, Ilia Topuria did so. With this one, I don't think that it'll be too competitive a fight. If I'm being brutally honest, which I kind of, that's what I'm about. I'm going to tell you how I think it is. I don't see it being awfully competitive. Islam Makhachev is at the top of his game. I has he even hit his peak yet, Islam Makhachev? I'm not too sure. He's 32 years old. He probably is just coming into his peak. I think his peak could even be at welterweight, but we'll see about that. But like I say, Islam Makhachev, number one pound for pound fighter in the UFC, and deservingly so. He's riding a long winning streak, and he's not just beating guys, he's finishing guys, and which is, I think, just so important in modern day UFC, and modern day MMA, modern day boxing, modern day combat sport. If you're cruising to, I mean, look at the announcement that we had recently. Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad at UFC 304. Both of those men cruised to victories in over a decision. They've put a few more finishes together in recent times, but they are decision fighters, which is ironic of when we consider how Leon actually won the belt. But you know what I mean. These two guys are not known for their finishing ability, which is why it took them so long to get a title shot. Bilal Muhammad, I think he's undefeated since what, UFC 205 maybe. I know he lost at UFC 205, but it took him, Bilal, who is a teammate of Islam Makhachev's, years to get a title shot because he's not a finisher. Now, Islam Makhachev has put together, yeah, okay, he didn't finish Alexander Volkanovski in their first fight, but if you look at his run to the title, so Arman Sarukian, decision. That's aged like a fine wine. That's really good. Davi Ramos, decision. Drew Dober, finish. Thiago Moises, finish. Dan Hooker, finish. Bobby Green, finish. Won the belt against Charles Oliveira via finish. Went 5 rounds with Alexander Volkanovski. Absolutely fine by me. Alexander Volkanovski rematch, finish. He's turned from someone that you wouldn't exactly rely on for finishes, as it were, to someone that you can pretty much say the fight won't go 25 minutes. You know, this, let's not forget, that was Alexander Volkanovski stepping up on short notice, Islam Makhachev having to adjust to a completely new style. Um, and it was in, I think that fight was in Australia, wasn't it? So, oh no, sorry, the first fight was it in Abu? Oh no, the first fight was in Australia. Sorry, I'm getting all confused. Yeah. So, you know, I don't think you could say too much, but if you sort of, you know, put that fight aside, Drew Dober, Thiago Mordes, Dan Hooker, Bobby Green, Charles Oliveira, five straight finishes to and finished Charles Oliveira by submission to win the belt. Then he rematches Volkanovski and knocks him out. He's at the top of his game. He's coming off the biggest and best win of his career, and now the challenger Dustin Poirier is 2-2 in his last four, including two finish losses. Yeah, even in those two wins, Dustin's gone life and death with Michael Chandler and Benoit Saint-Denis. Is Dustin at the top of his game? I very much don't think that he is anymore. I think the top of his game was probably when he faced Khabib, potentially when he faced Charles Oliveira. But let's not forget Dustin. He's historically struggled in recent times with wrestlers. In that fight against Benoit Saint-Denis took him down three times, controlled him for almost an entire round. Michael Chandler took him down three times. Dan Hooker took him down four times. Dan Hooker, a guy who is not a wrestler in any stretch of the imagination. And Khabib took him down seven times. Now, if you look at the wins that Dustin Poirier has picked up lately, like I said, Benoit Saint-Denis, he was losing that fight. He got dominated in the first round, and Saint-Denis' boneheadedness, as it were, lost him that fight in the second round. Then we look at the Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler has got one of the worst fight IQs in the UFC at the moment, which is why I'd be, little spoiler, I'm picking Conor McGregor to beat him. But he just doesn't have a good fight IQ, Michael Chandler. He likes to put on fun fights, and that's fine. Look at where it's got him. It's got him a main event slot in International Fight Week against Conor McGregor. But it's not a style that's going to win you a number of fights in a row. And then the Conor McGregor win after Conor broke his ankle. Yeah, it is what it is. Conor did break his ankle. Was that because Dustin checked, or was it because he kicked Dustin's elbow? We don't know. We know he had a slight stress fracture before that. And then the Conor McGregor rematch, UFC 257. He beat a very bad Conor McGregor on that day. And that's, you can only beat what's in front of you. I'm not sort of taking anything away from the win. He battered the lower leg of Conor McGregor because he knew that Conor would come in with an extremely heavy boxing style. And that was with a phenomenal game plan from Poirier. But they were at different points in their career. McGregor was coming off a huge, huge layoff. Um, you know, they were just at different points in their career. And, Poirier took the opportunity and ran with it. When Dustin's come up against legitimate opponents in recent times, unfortunately for him, he's lost. Charles Oliveira, top of his game, loses that fight. Justin Gaethje, top of his game, loses that fight as well. His takedown defense is at just 63%, and Makhachev has such a takedown and ground game threat that Poirier has to be mindful of that threat throughout the fight. He can't, it's difficult. This is what makes Islam Makhachev such a good fighter, is that he's got the takedown threat always in his back pocket. He's one of the best wrestlers in the UFC. But he's added the hands and the kicks to his game so that you threaten the takedown game, and then it opens up his hands. It opens up his hands so well. We saw it against Alexander Volkanovski. He has that takedown threat, which is why he can land the high kick. For me, Dustin Poirier's got this opportunity based on his previous resume, not his current one. A win over Benoit Saint-Denis, with the greatest respect to Benoit Saint-Denis, should not be getting you a title shot. Arman Tsarukyan should be getting the title shot, but the UFC needed a headline star for this card because everybody else is out. We've either got fights booked, they've either got fights booked, sorry, or they just can't turn around that quickly. We know that the UFC and Dana White want Dustin Poirier in main events. UFC 302 this weekend will mark his seventh pay-per-view fight, his third title shot, and what is his 40th professional bout. Is it going to be third time lucky, or is it? I think it's very much last chance saloon for Dustin Poirier. So what does he have to do to win the fight and to beat Islam Makhachev? Throw up the guillotine? Maybe once, but don't rely on it like he did against Benoit Saint-Denis. This is becoming quite a sort of meme online almost. But he can't be throwing up that guillotine, jumping guillotine, giving up bottom position because he in recent times when taken down, which is against Islam is fairly inevitable if Islam want to take it down to the ground. Dustin can't accept that position. More often than not, he's more than willing to have his back on the mat and not try and fight out of the position, which in turn loses him rounds, loses him fights. But what can he do against Islam Makhachev? I think he really needs to work the lower calf kick of Islam Makhachev, like he did against McGregor in their second fight. That'll stunt Makhachev's forward movement because he can't. Dustin also can't get backed up to the fence. We saw against Khabib when he did get backed up against the fence, he was taken down, and obviously that was the beginning of the end. If he eats that up that lower calf, which we know he's got the ability to do against, we've seen him do it multiple times against McGregor, against Chandler, he did it very well as well. It allows him to at least stunt the forward movement of Islam Makhachev. It's also a hard kick, if you're constantly throwing body kicks or constantly throwing high kicks, there's potential that they can, be blocked and you're caught off guard, or especially with a body kick, it can be caught and then you can potentially be taken down. With a calf kick, there is the threat of it being checked, but we haven't seen an awful lot of evidence to suggest that Islam Makhachev is particularly adept at checking leg kicks. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. He needs to be sharp on the jab, like he always is, because again, that'll keep Islam Makhachev at range. But when when he does jab, he can't, even if he does have success and does hurt Islam Makhachev, he can't prolong his exchanges with Islam because Islam will just duck underneath and take him down. We saw against Benoit Saint Denis, the finish came as he caught Benoit Saint Denis with in an exchange. That's all very well and good, but Benoit Saint Denis was never going to be, he's a brawler, Benoit Saint Denis, not a technician like Islam, and that I think will come round to bite Dustin quite badly if he prolongs his combinations, if he prolongs the exchanges with Islam, because we've seen Islam drop Alexander Volkanovski in an exchange, in a tight exchange, and we've seen him duck underneath many opponents and just take them down. That's what Dustin Poirier can't allow to happen. As far as the champion, the pound for pound number one, Islam Makhachev, I think the game plan's fairly simple. Shoot the high kick like he did against Alexander Volkanovski. We've seen Poirier, quote unquote, vulnerable to the high kick. Obviously, he was knocked out by Justin Gaethje in the second round of their BMF title bout at UFC 291 by the high kick. So, Islam's got that in his back pocket. We've seen him vulnerable to it before. So why not do it again? It'll bring the hands up of Dustin Poirier and keep, if Dustin's constantly having to bring his hands up, he against Justin Gaethje, he brought his hands up and he was still knocked out. But if he's constantly having to bring his hands up against Islam Makhachev to defend the high kick, it's going to expose his hips, to which Islam Makhachev can then look to can then look to take him down. Once the fight's on the ground, I think it's in the champion's wheelhouse. Sooner or later, he'll be able to get to Dustin Poirier. And like I said, Dustin is more than willing to accept a position on the ground. With that being said, his last chance saloon for Poirier, potentially his last dance of his entire career. So it's all to play for. He'd be willing to leave it all in there like he has time after time, one last time. And let's see how it goes. We could potentially be getting the retirement of a legend on Saturday night in Dustin Poirier as he puts those brand new UFC gold gloves down in the octagon and says, "This is me. I'm done with the sport," which would certainly be a shame. But the wars that he's been through, the finances that he's financially absolutely stable. At 35 years old, if he doesn't win the title, it's definitely his last chance at the title. We'll have to wait and see as to whether he can finally get the UFC lightweight title, the undisputed title, because obviously we know he's got the interim. It's his last thing that he wants to achieve in his career, and it's an exciting prospect of Dustin potentially becoming lightweight champion. Spoilers, I don't think it'll happen. I just think Makhachev's too good, but stranger things have happened. And talking about strange things, segueing into the co-main event, a middleweight bout. I'm not sure if this is over 5 rounds. It is five-minute rounds potentially. I'm not even sure. I wasn't even sure until this week that this fight would actually be going ahead because there was rumors coming out that the two men had actually never accepted the fight. But let's assume that it is Sean Strickland, the former UFC middleweight champion, which is crazy for me to say that because I still don't think that he's a top five middleweight in the world, let alone, championship worthy. It's just my opinion. It takes on Paulo Costa, one of the strangest fighters in UFC history, in my opinion. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, you've got Sean Strickland, the number one ranked middleweight in the world, just coming off a loss to the now champion Dricus Du Plessis, taking on the number seven ranked Paulo Costa. I've tweeted it before. I think I said it the last time Paulo Costa competed against Marvin Vettori. I'm not sure if Paulo Costa is any good at fighting. I think Paulo Costa has got a very good body kick. I think Paulo Costa has got a very good, very heavy hands. Do I think Paulo Costa is a very good fighter? I have no idea. I said his last fight was against Marvin Vettori. That's because I've done a lot of tape study on that. Of course, his last fight was against Robert Whittaker. I genuinely have no idea if Paulo Costa is a good fighter or not. Visually, he looks like a good fighter. The guy's shredded. He's ripped to bits. In the octagon, is he all too passive? Does he have the right people in his corner to tell him you lost that round or you are losing this fight? You need to do this. And if he does do this and do that, will he actually take that on board? I'm not so sure. Sean Strickland will look to do what he always looks to do, which could come around to bite him quite badly, is he will walk forward in that Philly shell style that we saw against Israel Adesanya. He will look to land constant shots. He will look to batter the lower leg of Paulo Costa and look to essentially jab his way across 25 minutes to a victory. Do I think that he has the ability to get past Paulo Costa with relative ease? I do. I think Sean Strickland could easily win this fight via decision and make it quite a boring fight. And that's the risk that we have with Sean Strickland is uh, uh he's not a finisher. Like we were just speaking about with Islam Makhachev. If you look at his you look down his record, he hasn't put back-to-back finishes together in the UFC. Um, is that's something I actually didn't realize. He finished his first UFC fight back in 2014, but since then he has not put back-to-back finishes together. His best run came before the Alex Pereira fight, where he beat Nordine to lead by finish. Then he went to a decision with Jack Marshman. Then he finished Brendan Allen. Then he went to a decision with Christoph Jotko, Uriah Hall, and Jack Hermansson. Then he lost to Alex Pereira. Then he lost to Jared Cannonier. Then he went to a decision with Nasidim Imanov. He got the title shot off the back of a finish victory over Abu Abbas Magomedov, who, with the greatest respect to Magomedov, no one had heard of before his main event slot. Let's not forget that. Um, but then he came up against Dricus Du Plessis. He was just able to kind of outwork him with the heavier shots. And you know, Paulo Costa is a heavier hitter than Dricus Du Plessis. With that being said, the gas tank of Paulo Costa across 5 rounds is certainly questionable. But can he? The question around this fight for me is: can Sean Strickland do Sean Strickland for five-minute rounds against Paulo Costa and not get caught? For Paulo Costa, can he land the shots on Sean Strickland to deter him walking forward? I don't think it will deter him walking forward, but can he knock him out like Alex Pereira did? That's the question for me. On paper, I'm picking Sean Strickland. I think he probably can avoid the big shots. He avoided the majority of the big shots of Dricus Du Plessis, who I can't remember that fight awfully well. I know Sean was cut in that fight, but I can't remember how well Dricus Du Plessis was able to kind of mix in the wrestling. Not something that I think that we'll see from Paulo Costa, but I'm just looking as to whether that's a potential reason as to why. Yeah, so Dricus du Plessis took Sean Strickland down 6 times. Do I think that Paulo Costa will look to take him down and mix the martial arts? No, I don't. He averages 0.45 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's got a high takedown accuracy at 75%, but I don't think, let me just look down. He took Luke Rockhold down twice, he took Vettori down once. They're the only takedowns that he's landed in his UFC career. He was just outworked by Robert Whittaker in that last fight. But what is filling me with quite a lot of confidence is that this is his second fight in 2024. He's actually been more active than, if we're going to be technical, more active than Sean Strickland. He fought almost a month after Sean Strickland, and now he's fighting again. Is that good for Paulo Costa? I think it is because he's been very inconsistent. If we look at his past fights, he fought Israel Adesanya in September 2020. Well, going all the way back, he averages a fight a year. Uriah Hall, July 2018. Yoel Romero, August 2019. Israel Adesanya, September 2020. Marvin Vettori, October 2021. Luke Rockhold, August 2022. Then he had over a year out to face Robert Whittaker in February 2024. Now he's competing in June 2024. I know he's had injuries. I know we've had, obviously, that was in the mix of COVID, but now that he's a little bit more active, could that be good? Could that mean that he finds his range that a little bit quicker? Only time will tell. But I'm I'm confident that Paulo Costa. I'm confident in Paulo Costa being better than he showed in previous fights because he is more active. What I'm not looking forward to is Sean Strickland fight week. I think that they make me cringe. He's there to try and sell himself rather than try and sell the fight. He says controversial things in order to try and get sound bites, and people like, you know, they're good at what they do, but people like the Schmo, Nina Drama, and alike give him that platform to say these controversial things, and there's no retribution for that. It is what it is. There's been a lot of discussion on the MMA Soccer channel lately about journalistic integrity. So go and check out the videos that Jeremy's dropped this week. Will some of his bravado have been, will his ego have been hit? We've seen him lose to Dricus du Plessis. We've seen him kind of cry on camera after talking about, mental health and whatnot. Quite possibly, however, it's unlikely. It is what it is. What I am excited for is potential press conference with someone like Kevin Holland, who is also on the card, facing Mikhail Olenizchuk. I don't get this fight. Kevin Holland was doing really well down at welterweight. Yes, he lost back-to-back fights to Jack Della Maddalena and Michael Venom Page, who's obviously fighting Ian Gary. It's a great fight. But now he's going back up in weight to face Mikhail Olenizchuk. I just don't really. I mean, it's a fun fight. Kevin Holland's always in fun fights. I just don't really understand it. I don't really get it. It is what it is. Um, I'm hoping for a stand-up war. I'm hoping for a pretty technical stand-up battle. Whether we'll get that, we'll have to wait and see. I think once Kevin Holland cracks you, you turn into a wrestler. But we'll see about that one. I'm picking Kevin Holland because why not? Got the return of Jadon Almeida, who looked like, I think he was my breakout fighter of the year last year, maybe, or if he wasn't, he was certainly in the conversation. Returning after his first UFC loss against Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades handed him that pretty devastating knockout loss back. When was that fight? Let me just check when that fight was. In March, UFC 299, so it's not too long ago. He landed 9 takedowns against Curtis Blades. He controlled him for 4 minutes 39 of the fight, and that was all in the first round because as he came in to take Curtis Blades down, Curtis Blades caught him with like an uppercut, and he hammer fisted the life quite literally out of him. And that's obviously got him a shot at the interim heavyweight title. Jason Almeida returning against Alexander Romanov, who started his UFC career with a lot of hype. 5-0, 4 finishes, and then he just returned and looked dreadful. He looked dreadfully out of shape against Martin Tybura and against Alexander Volkov. He got a win last time out against Blagoy Ivanov, who I think has been cut from the UFC and now competes in um, the PFL. His takedown defense is, I mean, this is a fight for Jason Almeida to get back in the win column. His takedown defense is 20%, Alexander Romanov. Um, Jason Almeida's takedown accuracy is 59%, but he averages 6.88 takedowns per 15 minutes. Jason Almeida is winning this fight most likely by finish. We've got Randy Brown versus Zales Zaleski. I cannot pronounce his name. El Elizu Zaleski. I recognize him, of course. I recognize the face. I just cannot pronounce his name. Um, that's a fun one, a welterweight to open up the main card. Got Roman Kopylov returning after his, I think it was a submission loss, wasn't it, to Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Um, he's taking on Cesar Almeida, 5-0 Cesar Almeida. I was looking to see if this one is 36 years old and you know, it's, I just want to see if that was no. This isn't a rescheduled fight. I don't get this one. Roman Kopylov versus Cesar Almeida. I don't know. It is what it is. Grant Dawson returns against Joe Selecki. Phil Rowe against Jake Matthews. Not a bad fight. Nico Price always in fun fights against Alex Morono. I swear we've seen this fight about 7 or 8 times. It feels like one of those fights that we constantly see. Mickey Gall returns. Who remembers Mickey Gall? Um, wow, Mickey Gall, 7-5. Started his UFC career 1-0, beat Mike Jackson, got on the main card, beat CM Punk, and beat Sage Northcutt. And then it's just kind of gone downhill from there, hasn't it, for Mickey Gore? Still a lot of, I'd say still a lot of potential, but he's 32 years old now. He's lost his last 2 fights. He's returning for the first time in over 2 years. He's had 2 years out of the octagon after back-to-back losses against Alex Morono and then Mike Malott. He takes on Basil Hafiz, sorry. Um, People may not be too familiar with Basil, but if you remember, that's the guy that took on Jack Della Maddalena on short notice and gave him arguably one of the toughest fights of his career. So that should be a fun fight on the prelims. We've got Jocelyn Edwards versus Aline Perez. Um, Perez is, I think, yeah, she lost her debut and she's won her last two. Jocelyn Edwards, pretty recognizable face in the UFC these days. She is, let me just double check what her winning streak is. So no, she's actually on a losing streak, unfortunately. She's yes, so she lost her last one against Norma Cornell. Before that, she was on a 3-fight win streak, although she missed weight on on 2 of those 3 occasions. And opening up the card, we've got Andre Lima versus Mitch Raposo. So that should be it's a pretty decent card. It's all about the co-main and main event. We've got a fun fight with Kevin Holland on there. This weekend, we've also got live from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We've got the 5v5 Queensbury versus Matchroom. I don't care who wins this. I'm just glad that we're getting some good, fun fights. It was supposed to be the week where we talk about Beterbiev versus Bivol. Obviously, that one's fallen out. Bivol's still on the card against Malik Zinad. Bivol wins that one fairly easily. Got the main event, Deontay Wilder versus Zhilei Zhang. Where's Deontay Wilder at after his disappointment last time out against Joseph Parker? Zhilei Zhang, obviously coming off a loss to Joseph Parker as well. Where are these two men at in their careers? Who knows? I think it'll be a good fight. I think Deontay, can he do what he's done to so many opponents in the past and just touch them with that power? If he does, it's going to be a long night for Zhang. But can Zhang just walk through Deontay's power like he has multiple times before? Let's not forget, Zhang's got 2 losses on his career, on his record, to Filip Hrgović, where I think he probably won that fight. And Josie Parker last time out. Where's Zhang at? We'll see on Saturday night. Like I said, Bivol versus Zinad. Bivol wins it. It's a replacement. It's not the fight we want, but it is what it is. Filip Hrgovic versus Daniel Dubois is quite a fun fight up at heavyweight as well. That's it's a tough fight for Hrgovic. It's a tough fight for Daniel Dubois. Like I said, I thought that would be for the IBF title. It's not. Um, as of yet, it's not anyway. You've got Ray Ford versus Nick Ball for the WBA World Featherweight title. Can Nick Ball finally become a world champion? I think he does. Hamza Shiraz versus Austin Williams. Great fight. Hamza Shiraz riding a lot of momentum. And opening up the 5v5 card, we've got Willie Hutchinson versus Craig Spider Richards. That is your combat sports. That is your MMA Sucker podcast for this week. As always, guys, please like and subscribe. Just like the video, subscribe to the channel. Get in the comments. Let me know who you think will win, Islam Makhachev or Dustin Poirier. I'm trying something out, trying something new out with the editing of this video. It might not go well, so there might be, where am I? A big gap on this side of the video. We'll see. We'll wait and see. But again, guys, thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.